too extreme, while supporters see it as an animal cruelty measure. The city has 6 furriers, including the nation's only black-owned one. Baltimore's population grew for the first time in a decade, adding 754 residents. With over 60% black residents, officials credit lower crime, better schools, and fewer vacant homes. And Chicago is set to pay $280,000 to a black woman, Miracle Boyd, who lost a tooth after a police officer hit her at a 2020 protest. The city council also approved $3 million for police chase and red light crash victims. Get BIN News on demand 24/7 on the iHeartRadio app.
Have you heard the secret of what New Orleans is talking about? I promise everything will be okay if you're listening here on the airwaves. It's that WBOK 12:30 a.m.
It's now time for Let's Elevate, the Arnie and Carey Show with Arnie Filko and Carey Grant.
All right, good evening, New Orleans, on this beautiful Thursday. Heading into the weekend, I'm Arnie Filko.
And I'm Carey Grant.
And both of us are in studio tonight. I think we got a really great show for you. In about 15 minutes, we're going to have, 20 minutes, we're going to have a really really globally acclaimed chef from Ukraine, Olia Hercules. Olia is in town as part of a initiative that I'm helping them on, and we're going to talk a little bit about Olia's really incredible career as a chef. She was over at Saba today doing some cooking for this weekend, but we're also going to talk about Ukraine in great depth from her family situation, what's happening there, where we are with this potential ceasefire, and a lot of different topics that we'll cover in just a little bit. But I thought we'd start the show tonight with one of the bigger stories in the state of Louisiana, and that is the execution right now date for Jesse Hoffman Jr., who is really the only person right now that is up for execution.
Right.
And the issues, there's a lawsuit, maybe multiple lawsuits. We're going to learn a little bit more about that involving the execution, and not so much the death penalty itself, but the methodology
of what's being used.
Exactly. So with us tonight, we have for a few minutes Peter Robbins Brown. Peter is the executive director of a great organization called Progress Louisiana. And Peter, do we have you?
I am here. Can you hear me?
We got you. Thank you so much for joining with Carey and myself tonight. And I know you have been on the front lines on this with other people, other organizations, but let's start tonight a little bit with your organization. First of all, just give us a thumbnail sketch of kind of the work that it does, and also where this execution is legally as of tonight.
Yeah, so I'm the executive director of an organization called Louisiana Progress. We work on a lot of policy issues, a lot of times at the state level, but also local stuff. And really the gist of it is that we fight on issues to support poor and working class Louisianans, the people who can't afford to hire advocates and lobbyists, and to defend poor and working class Louisianans from attacks that they face, again, both at the state and local level. You can learn more about us at louisianaprogress.org, including signing up for our newsletter. So I would urge people to check that out if you get a chance. But we're here tonight to talk about, as you mentioned, the Jesse Hoffman execution, or, that is of this moment not planned.
Right.
Yes.
And I've been doing some work with Jews Against Gassing. And so this isn't really a Louisiana Progress thing. This is really just a grassroots coalition of Jews across Louisiana. This really started a little over a year ago when during a special session early in Governor Landry's term, right back at the beginning of 2024, a crime special session. And one of the things they did was in order to try to get executions back up and going again, they added a method of execution that had only been experimented on in Alabama to disastrous results if you talk to the people who were there to witness it. It's called nitrogen hypoxia, but really is nitrogen gassing. It's gassing somebody to death, suffocating them with nitrogen gas. And as Jews, a lot of us, I mean, we have well over 100 people who have joined this coalition on their own. We just found that to be truly anathema to our experience as a people. Obviously, many of us had, ancestors who survived the Holocaust or died in the Holocaust, and many of them died from gassing. And so when you hear that and you hear that that's going to be used by the state to kill somebody, I think everybody, should be horrified by that. I mean, that's just my personal opinion. But again, certainly as Jews, we were very, very upset. We were moved to action, even got so far as to file a bill to remove the nitrogen hypoxia as a potential execution method. That bill made its way pretty far through the legislature, but did not ultimately pass. And so then earlier this year, when Governor Landry announced that the method had been that they'd finalized the protocols, is what they call it, and that they were going to move forward with executions using nitrogen hypoxia, we really got active again. Initially, there were 2 executions scheduled, one for March 17th and one for March 18th. So what is or would have been next week. One of the condemned died of natural causes. He was 81 years old and was suffering from some pretty major health issues. His name was Chris Sepulveda. But that left Jesse Hoffman, who was scheduled until yesterday. It was scheduled to be executed on the 18th, so this coming Tuesday.
Peter, let me stop you because you covered a lot of territory. Let me backtrack a little with you on some of the things that our audience may not know. First of all, I want to make sure that people understand this is not a Jewish issue. This is, and in fact, the Catholic Church has joined in the chorus. Archbishop Amon had a letter in the newspaper just a couple of days ago. There's a group of more than 100 New Orleans area business people that have come out against this. So there is a broad coalition that is working right now against this execution. And so a little bit of background. So Louisiana first of all, we haven't executed anybody in many years, but Louisiana used to do it through lethal injection. But as I understand it, Peter, the reason that the bill was passed to allow for gassing and electrocution, the state claims they cannot get the drugs anymore, right, for lethal injection. Is that basically the facts here?
That's the deal, and this is a problem that many states that are trying to perform executions are running into, is that the suppliers don't want to supply lethal injection drugs. Yeah. And part of in the same bill where they added nitrogen hypoxia, they added language to make it easier to shield the suppliers of those lethal injection drugs. So they're looking at other options, but nitrogen hypoxia is the one that is available to them. And just final note, when you talk about a larger coalition, veterinarians, a large group of veterinarians have come out against this because veterinarians are legally barred from gassing dogs and cats to death because it was such a horrific experience for veterinarians. And about 10 years ago, the legislature made that illegal, yet they're allowing it for human beings.
Right.
Peter, let me ask you a question. This is Cary Grant. I just want to know, it seems like to me there had been a great law of people on death row, but, no executions. And now all of a sudden, I mean, I don't know about the timing of all this, but it seems like there's an uptick of we want to go forward with these things all over the country. I mean, it just seems like all of a sudden we're back into the execution mode. What's changed in the legal world or whatever that's making that become a thing now? Like you said, we could have had 2 of these things, and unfortunately, or whatever, the guy died. But it just seems like all of a sudden there's a lot more talk and more activity on this front.
Yeah, it does seem to be a coordinated effort across the country. Again, particularly in red states.
Yeah.
Certainly, it's picked up. One of his first executive orders, one of President Trump's first executive orders, was to urge states that were running into problems to find a way to sort of push through and perform these executions.
Yeah.
But this is an issue with Governor Landry that predates even when he was governor.
Right.
Something he was pushing for when he was attorney general in one of his many clashes with former Governor John Bell Edwards. It's hard to pinpoint exactly why this has started, over these last, to your point, just like in the last couple of years.
Yeah.
I would say there's, let's call it a correlation, if not causation situation, where
Right.
you're seeing this being pushed in a coordinated way at the same time as you're seeing a lot of other sort of very maybe kind of reactionary pieces of legislation being pushed by similar groups, so whether it's tax cuts for rich people and limiting government, quote unquote, or, overall just reactionary efforts around criminal justice or tough on crime. And so it seems like there are kind of a core group of organizations that appear to be pushing an overall agenda, and performing executions is one piece of that agenda.
Yeah.
Let me talk to you, Peter, a little bit about the litigation. So first of all, the attorneys for Hoffman made the argument that the gassing method was cruel and unusual. It was unconstitutional, and also made some very creative arguments about the inmate's own religious. He's a Buddhist, and how this method actually violates some of his religious rights. Judge Shelley Dick from Louisiana, a federal district court judge, issued a ruling a couple days ago, basically staying the execution. But it seemed like really what she was saying is we don't yet have a full record. And before we should be going to the point of allowing a person to die, we should develop that record. So tell me if that's a fairly accurate account, number one. And then number two, what has happened in the last 48 hours? Because I know the state, the AG in particular feels very strongly, and that they filed an appeal. And also, you told me a little bit that there's a state court proceeding now. Talk a little bit about the federal and the state court cases.
Yeah, so you're right. I think pretty much straight, right on about Judge Dick's ruling. Essentially, she's saying that she thinks the people, representing Jesse Hoffman will prevail probably on their claim that it's cruel and unusual punishment. But again, to your point, saying that we need to look at this more, and to that, and there've only been 3 or 4 of these nitrogen gassing executions. They've all been in Alabama, and a lot of people have walked away from witnessing those to say, that this appeared to be cruel and unusual, and so that's, I think, part of where the argument's coming from. She issued this stay. The state immediately appealed, and so they're appealing to the Fifth Circuit Appellate Court, which covers Louisiana and parts of Texas, and it's based, it's in New Orleans. So while the stay is in place at this moment, literally by the time this show is over, the Fifth Circuit might lift it. We really don't know. These are, with these cases, these kind of always can bounce back and forth literally over the course of minutes, hours, days. So while at the moment, Mr. Hoffman is not scheduled for execution on Tuesday, that could change again by the time this show is over. A new layer of argument.
One quick question: is the Fifth Circuit meeting with just a 3-judge panel, or is it meeting en banc with the entire circuit? Do we know that?
We don't know that yet. My understanding is it will be the 3-judge panel, but I can't say that with certainty.
Yeah.
Okay. Peter, can you hang with us through commercial break? We want
absolutely happy to stay.
We want to talk about this state case. So why don't we take a break now so that we can continue the discussion? We'll be back in just a minute. We really would love to hear from you tonight, both on this really important matter in Louisiana and also our Ukraine issues in just a little bit. 504-582-9422. We'll be back in just a minute.
Hello, friend. Tavis Smiley here with a special announcement. You can catch my show at a new time, weekdays from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Same great topics, same great guests, same great conversations, just a little earlier in the day. It's Tavis Smiley, weekdays 1 to 4 p.m. only on WBOK 1230 a.m. What New Orleans is talking about.
WBOK 1230 a.m. online at WBOK1230.com.
The Arnie and Carey Show with Arnie Philco and Carey Grant.
And we are back. We're getting back to Peter Brown about our issue about the executions in Louisiana. And Arnie, you had some questions about
Peter,
the legal
I think
case.
you were going to tell us a little bit about the new state case that's been filed. Can you give us a briefing on that?
Yeah, so it goes back to an old Louisiana law that if a federal district judge essentially rules in the way that Judge Dick just did, that this more or less the case needs to be kicked back to the state, and there needs to be a 30 to 45 day period of review, of re-review essentially. That was just filed, I think yesterday, if not earlier today. So it's just happened. And, you know, we really don't know. This is really again, we haven't had an execution in 15 years. And actually the one that happened 15 years ago, the person volunteered for it. And so this law has not been brought in front of a judge in I don't know how long. But it is on the books, and it is, you know, a very reasonable legal reference point. And, you know, on the federal side, the state, with their appeal of Judge Dick's decision, is essentially saying this is an emergency. We need to move fast. You know, this execution is scheduled for Tuesday. And now the lawyers on the other side are saying, actually, there is no rush here because no matter what the Fifth Circuit rules, the state law requires this now additional 30 to 45 day review period. And so their argument is that not only is the federal case not an emergency or, you know, it doesn't require a rush, but there's also needs to be this state review side to it. I have to admit there's some legal minutia here that is beyond my depth. So I'm giving you kind of a layman's understanding of it.
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
It seemed a little odd as Judge Dick held the hearing the other day. I mean, there were just some things that just seemed not real fair. I mean, one of them was the protocol for the gassing was really not made available to Hoffman and his attorneys until the day before. And then there were redactions in the protocol. And I think the more the public learned about the method and the protocols that the state was putting forward, and they heard the testimony from Alabama, how horrific truly this method is to a person. You know, I personally think Judge Dick absolutely made the right decision to hold this off at this point. And I mean, do you think, we know that the Fifth Circuit is very conservative. Most of its judges were appointed by Republicans in the past. Do you think that there is much of a chance that the Fifth Circuit is going to uphold the district court ruling?
I mean, I think you kind of said it just right. There, you know, on the facts, I think it's an incredibly strong case. I think that if it was going in front of a objective panel of judges, that at the very least, some sort of a delay while they continue to gather evidence on the method would be ordered. The Fifth Circuit, you know, I guess I'll just, you know, I often disagree with their rulings. And so I personally don't have a lot of faith in where they'll go with it. That being said, judges do surprising things all the time, and and they are more legal experts than I am, and so it's really difficult to tell often with especially if it's a 3-judge panel. They kind of select them somewhat randomly, so it's really hard to predict these kinds of things. And I say this as somebody who does these kinds of predictions essentially professionally. This is a really tough one to call.
Yeah. Before we end this, let me ask you one more question. First of all, the other prescribed method of execution in Louisiana is electrocution.
Yeah.
Two questions, Peter. One is, why is that not being looked at and used? And I'm not saying any of these. Depends if you agree with the death penalty or not. I happen to be somebody that does not agree with the death penalty. So, I mean, whatever method you're going to use, I'm not sure I'd be very supportive of. But there was also an execution recently, I forget which state it was, where the person
chose the firing squad.
Was able to choose how he was put to death. And would it not make some sense to maybe go back to the legislature and maybe have the bill or have the law broadened a little bit to maybe add a method like that? That again, if you do that method, it's pretty hard for an inmate to make a cruel and unusual constitutional argument. Just kind of wondering your thoughts on those two things.
Yeah, so on the execution front, on the electrocution front, I don't think any state has used electrocution in many, many decades. I mean, at Angola, they have the old chair that they used as like essentially it's like a museum piece.
Right.
Because I think everybody more or less came to the understanding that electrocuting somebody, was cruel and unusual. I mean, and pretty much everybody who ever witnessed an electrocution was pretty shocked by how the person was put to death. And so I think having electrocution in there, I don't know why. I mean, maybe it was just to kind of say we're trying everything. I really don't know, but I don't see a world where electrocution is brought back as a method. To the second question about firing squad, that was in South Carolina. It was just last week or the week before, very recently.
Yes.
I would say I agree with you, Arnie. I'm not a proponent of the death penalty. If I'm sort of forced to choose a method, I guess firing squad does seem, I hate to even use the word humane in connection with the death penalty. But I guess it's how about this? It's the least it seems like the least inhumane method. Not that you would ever see me out there advocating that we start doing that.
Well, Peter, I just want to say one thing. Like you said, I mean, there's no humane way on either side of a crime for somebody to die. There's no humane way. But the real issue for our listeners and our particular audience is there's a disproportion of Black people who are incarcerated in this country, and these issues are important to them. I always try and bring things to what people's focus needs to be. They need to be focused on this because this affects people from their community, particularly this guy, and no matter guilty or whatever. But, this is an issue that will affect people. And like you said, the causality of having political agendas all over the country about doing this type of thing when we haven't been doing this as a country for a long time is very troubling, and the African American Black community should really be poised to take this on as yet another issue they need to focus on.
And again, the issue that we're dealing with in the state right now is not whether or not this person should be penalized. I mean, he did a horrific act. That's not the question. The question is, it's not even the issue being litigated is not really the death penalty. The issue, again, is the method. I would urge people that are interested in this story, look at a couple things. First of all, there's a really great op-ed today by Quinn Hillier in The Advocate. And Quinn is not, you're flaming liberal out there, okay? And he comes out very strongly in support that Judge Dick made the right decision. And second, there was some very interesting comments by the family of the victim who said, no matter what happens, this is not going to bring closure to our family. And again, I think all of that has some relevance to where this goes. But Peter, I just want to say thank you, you and others. We're working with Sammy and the legal team. Just thank you for the work that you're doing. It really is important. I think all of us are kind of waiting to see where this Fifth Circuit is going to end up, and then what happens from there. But hopefully, maybe we could bring you on another time and bring this case forward and see where it goes.
Thank you so much for having me. I just want to put one final point on Carey, what you were saying.
Yes.
Is that disproportionately Black and brown folks are incarcerated.
Yes.
They are disproportionately sentenced to harsher sentences, including the death penalty.
Right.
And what we've seen in Louisiana and across the country is many, many, many exonerations of people who are sentenced to death.
Right.
And disproportionately, those wrongful convictions were of Black and brown folks. And to my mind, the worst thing a government can do is wrongfully murder somebody.
Absolutely.
And they do it disproportionately with Black and brown folks for hundreds of years. And so I think, to your point, Carey, I just really wanted to put that exclamation point on it.
No, you're absolutely right. And I've said this before on the show that I wish we were doing more of legislating for the Innocence Project and things like that to make sure that we're dealing with the right people than, worrying about what method of execution that we're trying to get to. But thank you so much for being on the show. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much for having me, guys.
Thank you, Peter.
Appreciate
Take
it.
care. All right. Do we need to take a break, or are we're good to go? All right. We are going to transition because we have two wonderful guests in our studio tonight. We're going to, as I previewed, we're going to talk about Ukraine for the rest of the hour. Again, love to hear from you. 504-582-9422. And I've said this many times to our audience. I understand we have a lot of issues. Carey and I deal with so many issues in New Orleans and statewide in our country. And often we get asked the question, well, why are we focusing on foreign policy and what's happening in Ukraine or the Middle East? Well, the reason is it's important. It's really important. And, to a city and a people that believes in democracy and the upholding of rights, what is happening, and you're going to hear tonight, what is happening in Ukraine is just plain wrong. And in many ways, the policy of our government right now is plain wrong, hopefully getting better. So we have tonight a great guest by the name of Olia Hercules, a world-renowned chef from Ukraine, lives in England right now, in London. And she is here in New Orleans for a couple days with a very talented and hardworking staff member, Anastasia, all part of an organization and initiative led by Razom for Ukraine, which is a national organization based out of the East Coast that is really the very best in this country and really in the world, in my opinion, doing work for Ukraine. And they really do three things. One is they're doing on-the-ground work in the country, a lot of humanitarian work, delivering food, medicine, and supplies to soldiers, to regular people that need it within the country. Second, they're lobbying in Congress every day, trying to get members of Congress and the administration to understand the importance. And third is the reason they're here in Louisiana is they have a grassroots engagement area which brings Ukrainian people to parts of the United States. And we've been blessed because we've had a number here of visits to Louisiana. And Anastasia and Olia came back this morning. They drove 6 hours getting up at 4 a.m., so they're probably very exhausted. But they were in Shreveport the last couple days and now in New Orleans the next couple days. So welcome, ladies. It's nice to have you.
Thank you so much for having us, Arnie.
It's a real pleasure. So let me start it out. Olia, maybe just talk about your career to begin with, as in the culinary area and also your literary area as well.
Sure. Thank you, Arnie. So originally, I'm from the south of Ukraine. I was born there in the 80s, and I moved to the UK when I was 18 to study at a university, and I've been there for the past 22 years. In 2008, when the financial crisis happened, I changed my career. I was a journalist before, and I became a chef. I trained to become a chef. worked in restaurants, including for Yotama Tolengi in London. And then eventually in 2014, after the war broke out in Ukraine, it feels like in the UK people started asking questions. We see all of these headlines, but we don't really know about Ukrainians. Who are Ukrainians? You know, I've been asked many times, "Oh, you're from Ukraine, so you're Russians?" No, we have our own culture, we have our own language. It's a beautiful country with beautiful people, as friendly as you folk here in Louisiana. I've been welcomed here so much, and I've been loving every second of being here. So I wrote my first cookbook in 2015 called Mamushka. And then another 3 cookbooks followed, and I've just finished my memoir, which is out in the US in August. It's called Strong Roots, and it's about my family. It follows my family since 1921. I wrote it because I really wanted to explain to people through this book that this is not a conflict; it's a war, and it's not a new war. It's not even 8 or 9 years old. Ukrainians have been suppressed and colonized by the Russians for hundreds of years.
And the cookbook that you reference is not just some small cookbook. 150,000 copies have been sold, and it is now translated into 11 languages.
That's right.
So this is a pretty impressive project. You talked earlier today at an event that we were at about your family, about your dad and other members, and it was, I have to tell you, I mean, people were, pretty emotional. Talk a little bit about what is happening to your family so that they can get kind of a human interest aspect of this war.
Sure. So I was born in Kakhovka. It's a town near Crimea, just 70 kilometers away from the border with Crimea. And my parents were there at their home at the time of the big-scale invasion in 2022. So the Russian tanks have literally just rolled into my hometown. At first, they took part in demonstrations, and they said, "Why should we leave? This is our home. This is our businesses. This is our life. We're not going anywhere." And then, they started shooting, and they started making threatening phone calls, and I convinced them to leave in April 2022. So they left. It took them five days to arrive in Berlin, where I have my extended family living there. So my mom is still in Berlin, and my dad, being he's 67, he's a very typical Ukrainian dad. He said, "I can't be here. I will get really depressed and die here in Berlin. I need to go back to Ukraine and do something." So he drove back to Ukraine, and now he's in an area where he was born, actually, and he's an engineer, so he's turning an old tractor into a minesweeper.
Yeah. Tell a little bit more about that. That's an amazing thing that your dad is doing right now.
Yeah, so he saw online, he got there and he started doing volunteering. He went to, he started going to Kherson, the area where I'm from originally, bringing supplies, etc. And then he saw something online, a farmer that decided to turn a tractor into a minesweeper, and he said, "Well, I can do that," because he can just do that. He just knows how to do these things. So he drove all the way to Kharkiv, and that's a city right by the border of Russia, which is constantly shelled. And but also they produce really good tractors there. So he got an old tractor there. He drove it somehow back to where he is now in Mykolaievshina area. And with the help of 3 young men, it is now an armored vehicle, so with 10 tons of metal at the front, and it's remote controllable, so there's no driver. That's a driverless minesweeper, and when it goes into a field and all of the kind of metal chains stop moving, it detonates the mines. So he's just waiting for the weather to become a little bit better, to test it on the field, and hopefully to be certified by the Ukrainian government and to find investors and start production.
It's an amazing story. And Anastasia, I'm going to turn to you for a second, because I think what you heard about Olia's father is kind of emblematic of the creativity of the Ukrainian people. I mean, it's not like you had millions of drones sitting in a warehouse 3 years ago. I mean, Ukraine had to creatively manufacture weaponry in order to counter the Russian attack, right?
Absolutely. First of all, thank you so much, guys, for having us on this show. For both of us, with Ola being Ukrainians, but very passionate and proactive advocates for Ukraine, this is priceless to to have our voices heard. And yes, we were put in a very challenging situation, of course, with full invasion, but mentally we were slightly prepared to this because we knew who our neighbors are, and we've been fighting with the Russians since 2014. So partially we already had some manufacturers of drones, but definitely not on the scale that we have today. And I am beyond grateful of our people in Ukraine. And we are super grateful to America, of course, for all the support. And we're super grateful to Europe for all the help. But we are doing our homework as well. We have land demining system, we have land drones, we have air drones, we have sea drones, and all of that has been made in Ukraine, every single part. Actually, I just had my colleague in South by Southwest a couple days ago, together with the Pritula Foundation, another wonderful nonprofit based in Ukraine and in the United States, presenting drones that completely every single part is made in Ukraine. And it's so much cheaper to buy those drones and produce those drones that are actually saving human lives. And Ukrainian army compared to Russian army, we have the main difference between us, that Ukrainians care about our people. We are not doing meat grinders fights like Russians do. So for us, we want to invest in the drones so we can save human lives.
And every life is precious. I think that's the basic ethics difference between the two armies.
Yes, sir.
Olia, I know you have family fighting, and Anastasia, I think you do as well. And tell everybody, because I think, again, we watch it on TV, and it's been 3 years, and, we've heard all the politics, but when the war broke out, I mean, literally, Ukraine had very little notice of this. Russia thought that the war would end in 3 days. It'd be over. Ukraine would be captured. That didn't happen. But what I want you to talk about is average Ukrainian people who were just like Carrie and I, where they could have been radio people, they could have been business. They immediately said, we're going to become soldiers. We're going to defend our country and democracy, and literally overnight changed their entire lives. Talk a little bit about that.
That's right. If you don't mind, I'll tell you about my brother. So my brother was in Kiev at the time of the invasion. And he actually has 3 children. So he is exempt from going to the army. But he told me, he said, Oля, I don't want my children and I don't want my grandchildren to fight, so I'm going to go. So he joined the territorial army. He's never even held a gun in his whole life. And in his regiment, there were people from all walks of life, from bakers to actors to dentists, you name it, just normal civilians that just the day before were sitting in Kiev, which is a beautiful European city, making plans, drinking coffees, you name it. It was never a destabilized country. It was just a regular country, like any country in Europe. And all of a sudden, overnight, and we've all witnessed that, me through the screen of my phone, how the missiles were falling. And my brother joined the territorial army. And like our granddad, Victor, who also defended Kiev, but in 1941, he went and he defended Kiev with his brethren, but with civilians.
Let's talk about kind of where we are right now and where the Ukrainian people might be kind of mentally right now. Obviously, we saw the incident in the White House a week plus ago. Things have changed a little bit. I would like to think for the better since then. What is the mood in Ukraine right now, would you say?
I think I'll start. I went to Ukraine in September. This was my first time during the big war. And I noticed that every single person has been affected and traumatized by this war, because every single family in Ukraine has either somebody fighting on the front line or lost somebody in action or lost somebody from shelling. Absolutely. So or has casualties. Every single family. So people are exhausted from this trauma, tragedy, and pain and disaster, but they are not broken. They are not ready to just surrender. The fight is still there. The motivation is there, 100%. The main fact that everybody needs to hear and understand that nobody wants peace more than Ukraine. Nobody wants peace more than Ukraine because this is our land, these are our people, our brothers, our fathers, our sisters, children, which is, yes, this is a critical question, and we want for every politician and civilian to hear this. Russia kidnapped over 20,000 of Ukrainian children, and I, as a woman or as a just human being, I cannot imagine for those innocent kids being so lost, and they're 100% mistreated somewhere in Russia, and they're being assimilated to Russian culture, they're being brainwashed while their parents are desperately trying to find them and save them. So I don't see how parents can just give up trying to save their kids. So yes, the fighting mode is still there, but of course people are super tired and hurt.
Yeah. And that's a war crime. What Russia has done and Putin has done.
It's a genocide.
It's a genocide. And, you heard me say this earlier today. We know about October 7 and what happened in Israel, the beheadings, the rapes, just the horrific acts have been committed by Russian soldiers on innocent civilians in Ukraine.
Yes.
And for that, hopefully there will be justice down the road. Olia, you talked very movingly earlier today about what it's like for your home city and your house to be occupied by Russia right now, and some of the things that are happening in just your home city. Talk about that, because I think it's so American. It's so important for Americans to hear these personal stories, that this isn't some, theoretical conflict here. It really is very personal and very inhumane.
Sure, yes. So I still have family and friends living in occupation. For one reason or another, they couldn't leave. For example, a friend of mine, she's in her 60s and she still is in Kakhovka, in my hometown, and she didn't leave because her elderly neighbor was too ill to go. She couldn't move. So she decided to stay, and she's still with her now, 3 years on. So we have a little bit of contact. There's not much Wi-Fi. There's just one spot in the city, in the town, where you can go and catch a little bit. So sometimes we exchange. And she says that, it's, I can't even describe it. It's, there's my school that I went to is bombed. There's no health care. The hospitals are broken. There's no clean water. The Russians are making people to take Russian citizenship. Otherwise, they're threatened. It's a very, very disturbing situation, actually. So it makes me feel really uneasy and actually really upset when people talk about peace talks, and when they say, well, just you have to give up your territories. For me, that's not a territory. This is my home. This is where my people are, and so many people still are. Occupation is not peace. Occupation is not peace.
And it's to use an example of America, which is what we try and do, is bring things to people's minds here. Would you be willing to give up New Orleans and Louisiana because Mexico decided that they wanted to take it over? Would you want to go through those same things? I think you would take up arms, you would fight, and you would hope that people would back you. And I think that's where you guys are.
I mean, it's not the same analogy, but when Hurricane Katrina hit New Orleans in 2005, there were many people from around the country that were saying, well, close shop. New Orleans is over. No reason to try to save it. I mean, home is home, whether it's in the southern part of Ukraine or whether it's in the southern part of the United States.
Right.
You don't want to lose what is near and dear to you. I'm being told we need to take a break, so we'll be back in just a minute. Again, we'd love to hear from you, 504-582-9422. If you have any questions for Anastasia or Olia, we'd love to hear from you tonight.
This is Monica Pierre along with Sally Ann Roberts Daybone, co-host of Your Power is On.
Your Power is On gospel music show is coming on at a new time. Tune in Sunday mornings from 7 to 8 a.m. for music that feeds the spirit. Get your Sunday on.
Right here on WBOK 1230 AM and WBOK1230.com, the station you listen to
all day long.
WBOK 1230 AM online at WBOK1230.com.
The Arnie and Carey Show with Arnie Filko and Carey Grant.
All right, we are back in our last 15 minutes tonight, and really honored to have our two guests in studio. Yes. And you know, this is important stuff, y'all. Okay. I know we got a lot of issues in our own city and in the world, but what's happening in Ukraine is just darn wrong. And, you know, whether we want to believe it or not, America is still the beacon of hope and democracy around the world. And as disappointing as some of our European allies may be with some of the comments the last couple weeks, America still holds that. And you can be America first. You could be MAGA. You could be all of that. But America first also means keeping America strong. And part of being strong is that the rest of the world and the people respect you. And I think we lose sight of that because America first, you know, is a nice slogan. We've had it before in the 40s and we have it again now. But it doesn't mean being isolationist. It doesn't mean giving up on the rest of the world because, let's be honest, I mean, what happens today in New Orleans, in about 5 minutes, Olia's family in Ukraine and Anastasia's family will know about it. We are a globally connected world today, whether we like it or not. And that's why it's important for us to understand what's going on there, who's right, who's wrong. So I want to turn to the two of you to talk about nobody knows where we're going to go, obviously, but talk about where you think we are right now. I guess my question is, I did read some of Putin's comments today. To me, it was a lot of double talk, okay? It was, we want peace, we'll agree to the ceasefire, but we have a lot of questions, okay? And again, this seems to be kind of a modus operandi for the Russian president that he loves it. In fact, we were just watching on TV. It's up on our screen here. Yeah. You know, Vladimir Putin never wears fatigues. No. Okay? He wears a suit and a tie and, you know, a very Western dress and all of that. All of a sudden, isn't it interesting in the last 24 hours when President Zelensky of Ukraine says, we will agree to a 30-day ceasefire.
Now he's in military.
That he's in the border areas of Russia in military fatigue. I don't know. Does that strike you as a bit odd here?
It all looks like a big theatric show and a deja vu. We've been here before on these negotiations. We've seen him acting up, and he's a very good actor. I give him that. He can be a superstar in some of the theaters for crazy people. Forgive me, but we as Ukrainians, unfortunately, we know our enemy, and we've had over 200 rounds of negotiations and pretended ceasefire from Russian side, and Russia broke every single one of those agreements. So nothing new. And whatever Putin was saying today, he is playing the Western world, and I hope that the intelligent, strong Western world see it as clear as we do, because he is using the words as he never used before, but still the message he's sending very clear message that if the roots of the problem are not going to be fixed, then we don't see the ceasefire. And in his eyes, the roots are Ukrainian existence. Yes. The roots are a freedom-loving Western world, while Ukraine is being a shield for the Western world, including United States of America. While Ukraine is standing, America is looking strong in the eyes of all dictatorship, wild world. And in his eyes, Russian-speaking people are being suppressed in Ukraine, which is absolutely lie. My family was a Russian-speaking family before the full invasion.
So was mine.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And now we switched completely to Ukrainian because we don't want to speak that language that was just brainwashed, seated in our brains. So they're persecuting Christians today in Ukraine, and they want to have only Russian Orthodox Church ruling the whole Ukraine. And you tell me if that's a desire for peace.
Right.
Right.
You had, Anastasia, you were telling me about an interesting meeting you had recently. No? Okay. There was no meeting. We hope there'll be a meeting at some point. I'll say it. I mean, I've been up in the Hill in Congress with the Razone people, and it's really interesting up there. The Democrats, first of all, are almost 100% supportive of Ukraine. But when you talk to Republicans in Congress privately, what they will say to you is, we support Ukraine. We understand the democratic aspect. Not all, okay, I'm not saying all, but a good number. But they also will say to you, we got to kind of follow the lead of our president. It's got to be frustrating, isn't it, Oli? A little bit to hear that? Or Anastasia, either one.
I think that especially for Razom and for us being non-partisan organization, this is very important for us, for both of the parties to be open-minded and actually unite in this fight against evil. And we strongly believe that actually original old school Republican values, they would stand strongly against Russian genocide in Ukraine, killing Ukrainian people. So and this is so clear to me that if you're a respectable Republican, you should follow your principles. So that should be simple. And there are still some people who are ready to continue the fight.
Yeah. Well, I have to say this. I mean, Razom is a great organization, and it is nonpartisan. It works across the aisle for that. My hope is, as we get kind of the formal answer, will there be a ceasefire? What are the issues? If Russia pushes back, and I think this is where President Zelensky did a brilliant job a couple days ago, because he basically put it in the corner of Putin. All right, and if Putin comes out and either says no ceasefire or ceasefire with conditions, blah, 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 I think the rest of the world is going to really start to see him in maybe a different view. And again, I'm hoping the American public at the end of the day will understand right and wrong here and will put enough pressure on leadership so that they will make the right decision. In my opinion, America controls this. I said this earlier today. Europe is great. They play a very significant role in all of this. But at the end of the day, America still holds the most power. And I am hoping, maybe I'm being very naive in this, Carey, weigh in if you feel strong. No. My feeling is that if Russia comes back and says no, and the world sees that, President Trump can change this whole dynamic by saying, you know what? I was favorable to Russia. You're not wanting peace. I hear it with my own ear. And because of that, I'm going to support Ukraine even more than what we supported in the past. That, to me, would create the type of negotiation leverage where maybe Russia does have to come to the table. I don't want you to necessarily have to comment because we don't want to get into politics, but I want Carey to comment.
What we need to have happen, as is happening with our economic woes that are being created by our administration, is the thing that's turning the tide on that front, slowly but turning the tide, is people are upset. Our citizens are upset, and they're starting to push back on their Congress people and the like. This is that type of issue where what you said is very true. I don't care what side of the Congress you're on or which side of the administration you're on, pressure from the citizens saying, we want this to go this way. And what you're saying, Arnie, makes a lot of sense. I'm sure, and I think we all in this room are sure, that Putin will not go forward with this in any meaningful way with the ceasefire thing. That's the perfect opportunity for everybody to start calling their congressman, pumping that up and saying, this is wrong and we want this to go that way. The very thing that you said, Arnie. That will change the way that Trump is presenting himself, because the pressure on politicians makes a difference. We talk about that all the time.
Yeah. Well,
but
let's
I
hope.
think that's one. I think that's a strategy. I think that's a way of making this become the kind of issue that it needs to become. The other thing is, because our foreign policy is so messed up right now as a nation, we need this linchpin to change all of our foreign policy, so we can get out of fighting with Canada and a whole bunch of other things that we have no business doing.
Our guests are looking, because we're not going to put them in a position of
No,
comment.
I'm not.
I'm just saying.
I'm not asking them to say anything. I'm saying this as an American citizen on radio.
I'm moving. I didn't tell you, I'm moving to Greenland.
Well,
tomorrow.
there you
I'm
go.
not going to be able to do
you
radio
go.
anymore with you. But
There's a lot of land there.
we only got a
good
couple
spot.
minutes left. Oli, I want to turn this a little lighter here.
Sure.
Because you're going to be cooking in New Orleans.
Yeah.
I am.
And for everybody listening tonight, if you want a great Ukrainian dish, and Olia is going to describe it in a second, Saturday night, go to Saba. I'm going to give them a free plug here on Magazine Street, because Olia's dish is going to be served to everybody in the restaurant. Describe a little bit about Ukrainian food, and especially what you're making Saturday.
Sure. Well, Ukraine is actually a really big country and really regional. You know, the food varies quite wildly. But I am going to cook. There are going to be two dishes on the menu. One quite a regional one from the Odessa region, so it's close to the sea. I just picked that dish because I thought that it would resonate with you folks here in Louisiana. So it's a fish broth with shrimp and a little bit of smoky sausage, and served with olives and lemon and capers, and it's just delicious. And we are also going to make a very kind of classical Ukrainian dish called vareniki dumplings. It's going to be filled with potato and caramelized onions and served with a little bit of yogurt with harissa. So we're adding a little bit of a Saba kind of touch there, and served with brown butter and crispy onions. And I really hope that they will enjoy.
We're so hungry
Sounds
right
good,
now.
yeah.
And you're also going to be on the WWL Morning Show tomorrow, and you're going to be
cannot
cooking
wait.
a dish on that as well.
Oh,
so
good.
everybody should tune in
Yeah.
to that. You know, food is one of those, like music and culture. We understand that in New Orleans. It brings people together, doesn't it?
Of course, it's such a human thing. It's a thing that everybody does. Everybody eats. Everybody has a family. Everybody sits around the table. Everybody shares stories, and that's what I'm here to do.
Great.
That's wonderful.
Well, Olia and Anastasia are going to be here for a couple days. We have a number of events. Obviously, we talked about Saba on Saturday night, if any of you want to come dine. Also on Saturday at 12:30, Olia is going to be making a presentation to some of our international groups here in New Orleans. It's open to the public at Old House, I think it's called, on Bayou Road. It's a coffee house. So come at 12:30 for that and meet these young women and talk about it. But listen, thank you so much, really, for being here. It's so important that we continue to talk about Ukraine and bring it home to, our local community. I think it's great what Razom is doing, doing grassroots things. We had just a few weeks ago in the studio, we had some Ukrainian musicians, and they were wonderful. They're soldiers while they're also professional musicians. And I think the more we do things like this, the more we connect the people of America and Ukraine. So thank you both.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you both, and to the people of Louisiana and the people of America. We appreciate you, and we just could not be more thankful.
Absolutely. I'm going to join as a daughter of a brave warrior on the front line. Thank you to every American. Thank you for standing with Ukraine. Thank you for being good people. We love you and we appreciate you more than we can explain. Thank you.
All right. Slava Ukraini. Glory to Ukraine.
Heroям slava.
Heroям slava.
All right. We will be back next Tuesday, 6:00 p.m. Hope all of you will join us then, and we will be talking lots of topics. Good night, everybody. Have a wonderful weekend.
Good.
From the campus of Xavier University.